Welcome to Defining Dad Bod, where my dad, Coach Alex Van Houten, plus his 14 years of experience to work for you. You should listen to him. Here's Pretty Beast Mode. Who knows who we could be if we could become 1% better every single day.
What's up, guys? This is Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. I hope you're doing super well. You're listening to Season 3, Episode 36 of Defining Dad Bod, where we're talking about leveling up. This episode's been brought to you by the Better Daily app. Work hard to become 1% better every single day, but don't do it alone. Our community just launched our new app for Apple devices and Android devices, and we think you're going to love it. Go to definingdadbod.com/betterdaily and type in coupon code DADBOD, all caps, to save 25% on your subscription. That's definingdadbod.com/betterdaily. This is a quirky conversation compared to many that we have here on Defining Dad Bod, which is saying a lot, because as a host, I'm pretty quirky. But this one may take the cake. In this conversation, I had the opportunity to catch up with Eric Sui. He's the CEO of a content intelligence software called ClickFlow, and he also owns an ad agency called Single Grain, in which he's worked with companies like Amazon, Airbnb, and Salesforce. But what was very interesting to me was his recent dipping of the toe in the water, so to speak, of writing a book. His book's called Leveling Up, Winning at the Game of Life, and it comes from his long background of being a gamer in his adolescent and young adult years. And in this conversation, we got to talk about some specific topics. The book was a lot of fun to read for somebody who has a history in gaming. But playing games is not the primary topic of this conversation you'll hear today. Instead, we walk through several of the themes that come out of the gaming world that can be directly applied to business, life, relationships, and health. Again, I told you it's a quirky conversation. I sincerely enjoyed it, and I hope you find something valuable in it for yourself. And if you don't find something valuable in it for yourself, share this conversation with a gamer that you love. They'll know what we're talking about. But before we get there, here's your food for thought. My food for thought for you today comes from Jordan Peterson's new book, 12 More Rules for Life, Beyond Order. It's on the New York Times bestseller list, and I've very much been looking forward to this, not only because of how much I enjoyed the first book, which I actually did a piece on this show over 2 years ago, covering the relevance to health and fitness, and you can find that link in the show notes below. But in Rule 1 of his new book, he spent some time talking about the dangers of rigid structures without creative innovation. And while he's more interested in the psychological and maybe even the political aspect of that particular rule, I find this is a very commonly applicable theme in folks that I work with in health and fitness. Oftentimes when people hire me as their coach to look at their nutrition and to look at their lifestyle, they've been around the block enough to know that there's not going to be one tiny little thing that needs to be shifted in order to achieve betterment in their lives. Instead, they understand that they're caught in a loop, that they wake up, they eat about the same things, they go to work and do about the same things, they exercise or don't exercise, then they go to sleep and they do it again. And they realize that their current health and fitness is a reflection of the trajectory of the way things have gone for a period of time. For me, when I approach a new client and I get a sense of their story and where they're at and what they're hoping to see change in themselves, I often work to visualize not only the path behind them, but the path before them and the obstacles that are currently standing in their way that keep them from stepping forward. In his first chapter, Dr. Peterson's working really hard to bring two conflicting ideas together. One, the importance of rules and order to keep things moving smoothly and in a good direction. And two, the importance of breaking those rules and destroying the order so that future progress doesn't get stuck in the loop of the past. It's a tough question, and from a health and fitness perspective, I'd like to highlight the answer, which is fostering the creativity to try new things while also having respect for the things that have brought you to this point currently. If you're listening to the sound of my voice, it's very possible that you've done certain things in a very particular way in your life that has served you well, like brushing your teeth before you go to bed. I don't suggest stopping that anytime soon, because cavities suck and dental work is expensive. But it's also possible that some of those habits, like having 6 cups of coffee before lunchtime, are not serving you very well. And it's going to require some creative flair, or at least the willingness to try something new in order to decrease the caffeine intake in your life and lower the amount of stress your internal system's under. Maybe it's time to try some green tea. Maybe you need to take a break from coffee altogether. Or maybe a different habit, other than going to the coffee maker first thing in the morning, needs to be developed in order for you not to rely on caffeine to make the day look a little brighter to you. My food for thought for you today is this. The devil's in your default. I challenge you to sit down and make a list of some of the things that you're doing right now that serve you very well. And then, on the opposite side of the paper, make a list of some of the things you know aren't serving you very well. Because on one side of the paper, you'll have a list of some of the rules in your life that are worth abiding by. Working out 5 days a week, getting some cardio in, going to bed at 9 p.m., taking your fish oil since you don't like Alex's sardine recommendations. And then on the other side of the paper, what you'll find are not only obstacles that might be standing in your way, but creative problems that might be worth solving. And you can get started on those things. I don't anticipate overhauling your entire life in one day, but I do believe that with an appreciation of your past and the things that have served you well, and then a conscious eye on the things that haven't been serving you well, then you'll have made the first step in your journey to being in a better place than you are at this moment. If you need somebody to share your list with, shoot me a message at coachal@definingdadbod.com. That's your food for thought today. I hope it gives you something to munch on. Now, without further ado, let's get to my conversation about leveling up with Eric Sui. What's up, guys? This is Alex Van Houten with Defining Dadbod. I hope you're doing super well. I'm extremely excited to bring my guest, Eric Sui, to you today, guys. Eric, how are you today, brother?
Doing well, Alex. Thanks for having me.
Oh, man, we have so many cool things to talk about today. First of all, you have a new book out, just launched 2 days ago, as of this recording 2 days ago, and it's about video games. Actually, it's about more than that. But I want to talk to you today and introduce you to my listeners in a powerful way, because in the health and fitness space, video games get a bad rap because you're sitting in front of a TV doing nothing. And your book is like a giant collision in my mind between the 7 habits of highly effective people and maybe some Stephen Covey stuff, and maybe throw in a little bit of motivational speech and business and marketing acumen, and gaming, which for the average person would not make any sense at all unless you pick this thing up. So I'm so excited to talk about it with you today and some core concepts. The first thing I want to do is give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to my listeners. Tell us a little bit about your superhero origin story, because you've had quite the journey from gamer to investor.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, Alex, I mean, it's, I like to say that I'm the ultimate failure, or I was the ultimate failure growing up. So look, couldn't get a girlfriend for the longest time. And, I almost got kicked out of high school because I didn't want to go to this one required class my senior year. It was around politics, I think. And then I wanted to play World of Warcraft and poker in college. So my first year I had 6 withdrawals and 1 F. So I was subject to dismissal.
Wow.
And then I got fired from 2 jobs. What's interesting is yesterday, actually, so the guy that fired me, I got fired for trying to start a side hustle, which in retrospect, that was probably like, I actually don't regret getting fired for that one, but I've been fired twice. Let's just leave it at that. But that guy reached out to me yesterday. He's like, hey, I want to talk. I'm like, what do you want to talk about? And so, this whole like going from ultimate failure to all the way up to investor. By the way, I had to level up slowly, right? I had to go from learning, marketing. Then I had to learn how to manage people. Then I had to, I took over a failing business. I bought that company for $2 and, was able to turn that around. Luckily, like I almost actually tanked it completely. And then, gradually now it's like, okay, the way I look at things is, how do I invest in other companies? How do I invest a majority share or, buy the company outright? But there's levels to everything. And, you can't really shortcut stuff. This is why you see, when people win the lotto, they don't know how to maintain their money. This is why you see a lot of pro athletes, they can't maintain their money after they're done playing. So anyway, the final thing I'll say for right now around this is that I think the stigma is fair towards gaming. But, when you think about training, when you're going to the gym, and by the way, I work out every day, right? But when you're training, if you overtrain, you can tear your ACL, you can blow out some muscles, right? Same thing in the world of gaming. I call it the shadow world, right? If you overtrain in that world, you can harm yourself because you're not thinking about the other stuff. You can become very unhealthy, your mental health. And so what I like to say is whether you're training in the world of gaming or, in real life, you take that and you go impact other people with whatever, with whatever you learned, and also the power ups, the little endorphin rush you get after you train. So.
And part of your journey, just for my listeners to understand, because, they haven't read the book, part of your journey is not just the ultimate failure, as you like to say, the turnaround comeback story, but in that failure realm, you were a competitive gamer. Am I right in saying that? You were like winning awards and beating competitions and doing things that people haven't done before within games. So it's not just like, I failed my semester in college. It's like I was winning in a different world, but it hadn't translated to the real world yet. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. It's totally fair to say. And I didn't have the confidence. I didn't understand what I was actually learning at the time would actually prepare me for real life. So as an example, this isn't to brag, but back when I used to play games, we didn't have voice chat quite yet. It was kind of in the very nascent stages. So we had to type really fast. So now, I've carried this over. I can type at 144 words per minute at my high point. And so but that all comes from gaming, right? So there's a lot that resilience, teamwork, being on time, right? All these different types of things, doing your job, right? And so I would say, look, yes, I certainly won championships. I felt like I was, doing something bigger than myself. And I didn't realize this at the time, but, human beings, at the end of the day, there's three things we ultimately want. We want to obviously maintain our health, right? Our mental health, our physical health. But the other thing is we want to contribute to something bigger than ourselves. And then we also want to feel connected, right? I didn't really feel that so much in real life. I got a lot more of that in the gaming world because I was playing at such a high level. And so, but nobody helped me, connect the dots. And that's why I created this book, because the message needs to be said. There's over 3 billion people in the world that have played a game, and they need to understand that there is a connection there.
And it's a very deep connection, and one I really haven't talked much on this show about, but it might surprise my listeners to know that, myself included, and trainers and nutritionists that I've worked with, most people that are in the health and fitness world game regularly, are playing some sort of game regularly. Like my son and we play Minecraft for 30 minutes every night before he goes to bed. That's like,
nice.
That's like our special time if he has respected his mom and cleaned his, he's 5. Okay. So like this is making a diamond pickaxe is a big deal, right?
Yeah.
But what's really crazy about it is in the daytime when I'm trying to teach him a moral lesson, I'm always bringing up Minecraft. Like, hey man, when you're in the nether, you could go this way over the lava, or you could go this way through the cave. How do you choose which way to go? For him, that's a language he understands and translates to the real world for him in a very practical way. However, you spoke kind of the dark side of gaming too, which is, you've been somewhere for a while, you're bleary eyed. You even talk about this in the book. You're like, I can only live so long on pizza and sitting, like, which is rough. So we'll get there in a second, but I guess I want to start with what ultimately inspired you to put pen to paper and write this book? Because it's one thing to say, hey, I was a gamer once upon a time, and now I invest in portfolios of business, and I have podcasts, and I help people. You run a marketing firm on one of your branches of your interests, and so you help businesses get better at what they do and attract new customers and whatnot. What inspired you to pause from that and say, you know what, I'm going to revisit my gaming days and make that practical to what I'm up to right now?
What's funny is the whole thing is just leveling up. It's like the book itself. I didn't realize this until later, but I do feel every day like I'm playing World of Warcraft or EverQuest. And so, when I wake up in the morning, so let's say, I'll hop on my Peloton bike. I'll do all the cliches, right? The intermittent fasting, the meditation, right? The journaling. I do, sleep optimization. Like I spent, a good chunk of money on that, right? And so by the time I actually start my day, I've got 7 buffs, right? So, people cast a spell on you, you get stronger, you get more intellect, you run faster and all that. So I feel like I'm already going, right? Then I just go on with my day. And then I just think of everything as a puzzle. Like, oh, if I'm going to buy this company over here, or if I'm going to try to hire this person over here, how do I incentivize them the right way? How do I think of the best terms for both sides over here? There's like little puzzles to everything. And then the day ends, I'm just tired. I go to bed, but the sleep is a power up too. And then if I'm fortunate enough to wake up the next day, I just go again. I'm just going to keep going. The game never ends. And so I'm like, okay, maybe there's a message here because nobody has talked about this yet. And yet this esports thing is exploding. So as a marketer, I can jump on this trend. And by the way, you just talked about growing other businesses. Like if you look at the trend, I love learning and I just love growing things, right? And so, if you strip me to my essence, I'm a learner teacher. If I had nothing, I just would keep learning and I'll just keep teaching to articulate my thoughts. People are like, Eric, why didn't you just write a marketing book? It makes a lot more sense for your businesses and that's what you're known for. But that's not what's interesting to me because long term, I think a message like this, if it affects, a good chunk of people, we're going to build a brand new community. We're going to build a movement around it. And I'm not so interested in the kind of short-term profits. I want this to be, you talked about 7 habits of highly effective people. We can think about how to win friends and influence people. How to win friends and influence people has been around for over 100 years, which means it'll probably be around for another 100 years. It's called the Lindy effect. And so anyway, people say, hey, look, when you write a book, make sure you have a message, not just to try to make money. Because if you're optimizing for money, you're not going to make money. So
yeah, well said. And you didn't actually mention this in the book, but just over 100 years ago, there was a psychologist named Jean Piaget, and he saw the world we live in and the development of morality in childhood as a game. And that the better the game, the more everybody wants to play it, and the better the game gets over time. And you can't break the rules of the game or people don't want you to come play anymore, right? And that's how things develop. And what's really interesting is what I read in your book was, 100 years later, after Jean Piaget, we've all played games, not just like kickball or tag or hide and seek, but we've all played Mario, or we've goofed around with Morrowind, or we've goofed around with StarCraft, or everybody's got Candy Crush or something goofy going on, right? Although given your gaming experience, I think Candy Crush is like a sugar version of the meat of gaming. But anyway, so the ethos of leveling up, that's the title of the book, Leveling Up, How to Master the Game of Life. The essence of that is actually very deeply psychological. And in some of the elements that you bring to the forefront, it's like you identified why gaming is so popular and seems to sit so well with the moral and productive functioning of the developing human mind. And, we could talk about the statistics around how many people are actually involved in gaming regularly, especially adolescents, especially during a quarantine time. But I sincerely enjoyed that. Now, are you familiar with any of that work, or does that sound like it just resonates with the core of what you were trying to capture?
There's one thing, I'm not familiar with his work per se, but what I would say is, if you think about school in general, it's why is it that, most of the time, people fall asleep or they're diagnosed with ADHD. It's because the content is boring, right? But when you make it like a game, it becomes fun and people are engaged. It's the same thing with creating a wonderful culture at a company, right? You look at some of the best companies in the world, the top CEOs in the world obsess over culture. But to get the culture right, you have to get people engaged. And one of the best ways I know of to keep people engaged is to treat it like a game, right? Yeah. And so I think we're kind of saying the same things here. But that's what it is. People get bored of things or they're diagnosed, maybe misdiagnosed, because stuff is boring. So
Right. And a game is something you can win and something you can get better at, right? Which kind of brings me, I have 3 things in particular that I really like to pull out of the book and get your thoughts on and wrap about a little bit here. It brings me to the first thing I wanted to talk about from the book specifically, which is the noob phase. So for those who don't know gaming, noob, N-E-W-B, means you are brand new, and kind of a corollary to that, you suck at the game, period. Like, you're very bad at it. I played Halo with I had a college roommate who was super into Halo. I didn't play much Halo. I played a lot more real-time strategy games like StarCraft, for instance, or I really enjoyed the RPGs, the Final Fantasy VII and Chrono Cross and, Morrowind. So I go to play Halo, and I'm the idiot, like, in the corner, pointing at the sky, throwing grenades at myself, dying regularly, and if I wanted to hang out with my roommate, I had to figure out how to do this game. Like, if I wanted to connect with this guy, because he was in there, like he was doing his math homework in between rounds. He was a very smart guy. Like, he was crushing it too. Anyway, that said, the noob phase is terrible. And you have an entire chapter on this. The noob phase is terrible. It's boring. You suck at it. It regularly hurts. And in the health and fitness world, I talk about this regularly. It's called the alert phase of training. It's where you go work out. Maybe you haven't worked out in a while. Maybe you've never worked out before, and you're doing granny stuff, right? Like, you're doing stuff that you think, and sorry, if grannies are listening, no offense, like, you got to start somewhere, but you're doing granny stuff and you're like, man, when do I get to lift the heavy weights? When do I get to run fast? When do I get to do this? And it's like, you got to grind, you got to put in the time to get out of the noob phase, right? So can you tell me a little bit about what inspired that chapter and how that is relevant in the world of business that you're frequently in?
Yeah, I mean, let's take this back to the gym real quick. I remember when I used to see, when I was untrained, I used to see people, able to put up a plate, right? So, 135 pounds, 45. And I was like, I'll never be able to do that. But then it's like, I kept comparing my chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 25. So I would try to do it. And that's when you start to get injured, right? When you try to fast track your success, it usually doesn't work out. You have to slowly compound it over time. It's just same thing with business too. Most people give up too early, whether they're trying to build an audience on YouTube or TikTok TikTok or whatever, usually it's a 2 to 3 year journey to start to build an audience. With business too, it's a 2 to 3 year journey. It takes time to compound, and most people give up too easily because they can't take the pain. And so, part of it is, thinking about the new mindset or the apprentice mentality is, sure, you can have strong opinions, but, hold them weakly, right? So when you have new data that's presented to you, you can change your opinion on dime. Most people are just too stubborn. The other thing I'll say too is when you understand that the pain is a prerequisite to success. Like everyone has been through the pain. It's basically seeing if you're going to stick around. Most people are like, oh, I started my podcast, I gave up after 3 months because, I wasn't getting that many downloads. Well, again, that's the filter right there. And so if you reframe that as, oh, the psychological pain is actually fuel and it's par for the course, then it motivates you, right? So for me now, growing up with Asian parents, it's a constant beatdown, right? And then playing a lot of poker, it's a constant beatdown too. You learn to be resilient. And so now, let's say I get snubbed for something or, someone's, not saying something nice or whatever. I'm like, that's great. Like, I'm not angry. Just give me more of it, right? Give me more of it. There's a character in World of Warcraft. I think the name is Gruul. The more you hit him, the stronger he gets, right? And so I think that reframe is helpful because so many times in life, people are going to criticize us. They're going to say all these things. We're going to get roadblocks. Oh, this business is not good enough. I'm not going to invest in it. It's just like, dude, give me more, right? And then if there's good insight from the people criticizing, like, oh, okay, that's great. Because when I look at feedback, when we're doing like a 360 review, it's for me, I don't look at the praise. I go straight to what do I need to improve at, right? And so for me, because that's the gold right there, right? The praise is great. That means, I'm doing something right, but give me more of the negative stuff, right? Give me more stuff to fix so I get stronger. Give me that.
Well said. You got to find the chinks in the armor, right?
Yeah.
So you actually brought up two concepts that on their face seem contradictory. You said some people are too stubborn.
Mm-hmm.
You can have strong opinions, but hold them weakly. But also that you have to be resilient. And it sounds on their face that those aren't the same thing, but I would love to hear your thoughts on how I parse this out. But in my mind, it's you have to be resilient in your resolve to get better at what you're up to, but you have to be open and not too stubborn about how you're going about it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the line you also draw?
That's correct. So I'll use an example right here. So the podcast Leveling Up, for the first year, I was doing it. I was spending 6 hours a week on it while I was trying to save Single Grain, the ad agency. And after the first year, I was only getting 9 downloads a day. So that's about 270 downloads a month. And I kept doing it. After the second year, I was only getting 30 downloads a day. So 900 downloads a month, right? And you want to talk about resilience, that's resilience right there.
2 years is a long time to keep recording a podcast.
Yep. So really not much movement, right? But the resilience was there. And then, we kept going and then we started to iterate more and more. We did grow, right? We did 3X, right? The first year to the second year. But if we stopped, we wouldn't be where we are today, which is about 1.6 million downloads a month. So we kept making iterations. It's like, okay, maybe we should interview people with, larger audiences, tell them to promote it a certain way. Maybe we should, go on to, put this onto like a Product Hunt, which at the time had a podcast section. Maybe we should hit our email lists. So we kept adjusting and then we started a new podcast as well. And then it just kept snowballing from there. And so the first year, I didn't iterate really much at all, right? But it's really kind of into the second year, we started thinking about, okay, something's got to give and then maybe we need to give up. But also, I also changed my mindset into not thinking so much about the downloads because I was thinking about, okay, the downloads, they're not that good, but I was learning from amazing people and I was selfishly asking questions to help me save my business that I bought. And then the other thing too was I was building these relationships for the long term. So I changed the KPI, the key performance indicator, from, focusing on downloads, which probably would have caused me to give up a lot sooner, focusing it on the learnings and the relationships. So that's a way of kind of, constantly iterating in my mind and making adjustments while staying resilient the whole time.
I love that. It's the idea of the game within the game, right?
Yep.
Because you're getting more downloads. I mean, from a podcast perspective, that's a great KPI. Like growing your podcast, growing your audience, making an impact on the group of people who find it meaningful and then recommend it to a friend, that sort of thing. That's a great KPI. But the bigger game, the game that kind of umbrellas that smaller download game, is what am I learning here? How am I getting better? What kind of meaningful conversations are occurring because of this game that I'm playing? And I think in my mind, that's a powerful part of the noob phase, is to keep your eyes on the bigger prize, right? Because in your health and fitness journey, when you're an untrained individual, let's say you're trying to grow some muscle and lose some fat, you're not going to see like amazing results in 4 weeks. Just not going to happen that way. Your body's like trying to get on board with everything. Your brain's trying to get on board with everything. If you don't stick that out, if you don't say, hey, I can walk a little farther than I used to, I can do moves I never could before. I've cleaned up my breakfast. I'm getting more sleep. I'm feeling better. Even if the number on the scale's not moving yet, having that big picture mindset around the game within the game is a very powerful part of overcoming the noob phase. Do you have any other thoughts or comments that you'd like to make around enduring the noob phase and making the most of it?
So I think, it's understanding that the struggle is necessary, and that, I think now I understand, like I mentioned earlier, that, all good things take about 2 to 3 years to get working well. But also like really good things usually take decades. So I think it's having short-term urgency and working really well, but understanding that, if you keep compounding and you stick with it, you're working smart, you're going to get there, right? Again, it's most people because they give up too easily, and they haven't leveled up the resolve yet or the resilience yet to be able to take the pain, right? I think the noob mindset causes you to think about, hey, like I'm never really as bad as they say I am, but I'm also not really as good as they say I am too. So it's like nothing's too good, nothing's too bad. You're just kind of even keel. It kind of is what it is, and you just keep working. And by the way, games have an end to it. It's a zero-sum game for the most part, right? Like, football at the end, like, Tom Brady wins the Super Bowl, right? There's only one winner. I think what's important for people to understand is that life in general, if you look at it as an infinite game that doesn't end, and you're just trying to get 1%, you're leveling up 1% better every single day, right? That's what it is that makes it fun, because you learn to play long-term games, right? If you learn to play kind of finite games, you're going to think more short-term thinking, and you're going to optimize the wrong way. This is why studying the best investors in the world, look at them, Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway, and Charlie Munger, right? They buy businesses, and for the most part, they hold them, right? It's just a lot of investing in life. You kind of just sit there, right? You think about the long term, you sit there, and then you make some big decisions every now and then that's life.
And then you have to be willing to ride those out, right? And adjust as needed. So one of the things you said in there, and I'm glad you brought that up, is in the gaming world, things happen really quickly and they're much shorter term. Like very few games are like, you have to play this game for literal years before you can reach the summit or pinnacle. And there are some very complicated games that require a lot of practice and are very dynamic, right? That's a different story altogether. But life as a game ends when you die, theoretically, right? So it keeps going. The time frame is much larger. And so understanding that the next level is something that you construct for yourself. And that was one of the things I loved about the way you wrote this book, by the way, is you had kind of a nice pathway among levels. You can't see me as a listener. I'm like holding an imaginary book in my hand with the cover open. And there was a pathway between chapters as these medallions or levels that you achieve by walking through the book, which I thought was very well done, by the way.
Thanks.
And in life, you don't get that. Like I didn't wake up this morning and, my app was launched. We just launched an app in the Apple store, but there wasn't like, confetti and a quick like level up screen, like da-da-da-da, and like I got all these, buffs and increases to attributes. It doesn't happen. But if you as a person understand your life as a long-term game in that respect, and you make a point to identify, coming out of the noob phase, for instance, hey man, I've graduated. I don't suck at this anymore. Like I'm kind of stepping out of the space of noobness. That's pretty powerful. Have you done stuff like that in your own life to distinguish those phases of leveling?
Yeah. I mean, the beautiful thing about the Peloton is that there's actually badges in there. So, yes. That's constant reinforcement every day. What I will say is, when I think about, the other thing is I have a meditation app too. So yeah, there's a badge in there too. For me in my head, I kind of have, when I journal in the morning, there's a streak, right? If you don't fill it out, obviously it's like, oh, you missed something. So I kind of have it all. It's kind of all being tracked. I actually haven't thought about this, but even with my sleep optimization, like my scores, that's all being tracked too, right? So it just depends on how neurotic you want to get about it. But I hadn't actually thought about it until now that I realized, a lot of it's being tracked.
Well, and then like if companies like Fitbit and Garmin did this with activity,
yep.
I had clients like 8 years ago who would be up at 11 p.m. walking around the parking lot of their apartment complex just to get their trophy for their steps in a day.
Yep.
And it like that was real. Like that, they're like, no, I got to get my trophy. Like they're telling their spouse, you can watch this without me. I got to go get my steps in the dark.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah.
But when that drive inside of us human beings, when we have something that we want to win, is so powerful. And that's required to get through the noob phase, as far as I'm concerned. If you don't know what game you're playing and you don't know what you're trying to win and you focus on the wrong thing, you're not going to make it through the noob phase. It's just too hard.
And by the way, like the whole concept of there's only 15 power-ups and leveling up, but the whole idea is you're just going around in life collecting power-ups. You're understanding you're picking up different habits and you're reinforcing them. You're picking up different mental models as well, and I'm happy to talk talk about that. But that's what it is. There's much more than beyond 15. And if you keep using a sword over and over, you're going to have to repair it, or you're going to have to go get a new one, right? So I forgot what the stat was, but I don't know how true this is, but after high school, just the percentage of people that actually read a book is like really low. Maybe it's like 10%, 15% of people. It's bad, right? So people kind of stop leveling up, and then they wonder why they're not getting the results that they want, right? It doesn't mean you need to go start an amazing business. If you don't want that, that's fine, right? You just got to figure out what you want first, and you got to go defeat the levels to get there, right? Because you don't deserve to go to the next level until you beat the current one.
Well said. And that's applicable in health and fitness. That's applicable in relationships. That's applicable in the business world. I mean, here on the Defining Dad Bod podcast, we talk about fatherhood and parenthood pretty regularly. And gosh, you want to talk about having to level up. Like, our kids are leveling up whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
We got to level up with them, or they're going to leave us behind.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, in my mind, I don't have kids yet, but when I have kids, I'm just like, I want them to be better than me. I'm going to level them up past me. That's the goal. That's
the goal, right? You've heard the phrase standing on the shoulders of giants. Like, I want to be a giant.
That's what we're doing.
To let them stand up there, If they outgrow me, that's not helpful. They can just stand on their own. So that actually brings me then to in my opinion, and I mean, there are a lot of powerful concepts in this book. In my opinion, something that's spoke to me in my journey, and something that we speak about a lot here on the show. In fact, it's a part of the intro. My son, in the intro of the show, says, "Who knows who you could be if you could become 1% better every single day?" And when your publicist gal reached out and was like, "Hey, I believe Eric would be a great guest on your podcast," I opened your book, I read through it, and I think it was page somewhere in the 130s or so. I saw the graph of the power of 1% better. And I was like, we have to talk, because this is like the guiding principle for literally everything that I do with health and fitness clients and our audience and our just our philosophy for what we do around here. And in this graph, basically, it's a line at 1. I hope you can picture a graph. There's a line at 1. And for you math nerds out there, that's called an asymptote. An asymptote means you never touch this line, right? So you start at 1. What happens if you degrade 1% every single day? Well, there's a very slow and steady drop to 0 over time. But what happens if you progress 1% every single day? And what happens is it's actually a parabolic effect, meaning that the line starts and then it like curves up, almost like what happens when a skateboarder hits a half pipe. The trajectory continues up, and it's almost an upward arrow toward the end of it. And the idea is like, look, if you become 1% better every single day, who knows what you can do? Who knows what the top level is? Who knows what games you'll be playing when you hit that place? And it was relatively early on in the book, probably 5 or 6 chapters in. But that concept in and of itself is, man, if the world just could grab onto that, and if our generation of gamers and non-gamers and parents could just grab onto that and approach every day that way, we can't even imagine what would happen. So what inspired that chapter for you? Because I know where this came from for me, but I'm very curious where it came from for you.
I think it's, when I look at my background, it's actually one of my friends said this. He's like, your rate of learning is like, it basically is parabolic. Like, it's just like you suck, and all of a sudden you just take off, right? And he said this to me probably in my mid-teens. And, I didn't realize it at the time, but that's basically been my entire life. It's just I stick with things longer. And the things that I keep jumping around on, I never really get that good. I never become that world class at it. So I think it's important for people to understand this, because especially the people that are kind of in their teens or early 20s, because a big chunk of this book is basically how to think. And we're not taught how to think in school for the most part, right? And just going back, at least in the United States, thinking about history, this country was founded by entrepreneurs. And so what's happening now is, you have kind of the teachers, they go through a process, but they're forced to go through a curriculum, but they don't teach people how to think. They don't teach people resilience. We're not taught anything about taxes, how to manage our finances, all that type of stuff. That is very real life stuff. And we're kind of left to fend for ourselves later, right? But if we just give them a little taste of it, right? Hey, this one concept over here, we're going to plant the seed for you. You just got to get 1% better every single day. And again, if you think in decades, you're for sure going to get there. And forget about comparing yourself to someone else. You just got to work on you. It's you versus you every single day. And you're just going to keep playing the game. Every single day is a gift, right? Make the most of it, and enjoy the game while it lasts.
You mentioned something in there about like our education system not teaching, and obviously many of our listeners are parents. What's interesting is there's a divide between how we expect our kids to perform in school versus how we expect them to perform in life. And one of the things I love about this book is it takes that thing that a lot of kids are involved in, gaming, and it takes that concept and shows how it applies to everything. Like, if you take the same ethos that brings you back to the game every time, I mean, it's it's an addicting thing. It's an addicting thing to get better at things. And if you can take that same ethos and apply it to your health, and apply it to relationships, and apply it to schoolwork, and apply it to business. If you can take that same ethos and apply it in those different places, then 1% betterment is almost guaranteed, because you're going to consistently come back to it. And what are you going to do? Get worse every time you do it? That's not how we work. Like very, very few and far between, unless you're overtraining, like you said before. Like unless you're 1% better is like, I haven't worked out in a while, let's do a 5-hour CrossFit challenge. Like, yeah, it's not going to play out well for you, right? But in my mind, it's very timely. It's a very timely message that the 1% betterment can come not just from the ethos of gaming, but that this really is the way forward. Like, we have to get better with business. We have to get better in politics. We have to get better in social media. We have to get better in conversations like this. We have to be able to do that. And if we can't, then why would we play the game at all? That's why it's addicting. That's why we keep waking up in the morning. So from that perspective, are you in the noob phase anywhere, Eric? I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah. I mean, so for me, I mean, like I don't have kids right now, right? So I think that I'd be a complete noob at that. I think it'll be a fun journey, but I wouldn't know what to do. I think there's a lot of studying to be done there. I think I would say, relatively speaking, if I look at a lot of my channels, podcasting, great, when I look at, our SEO traffic, that's great. But, our YouTube channel isn't as strong as I'd like it to be, right? We're at 54,000 subscribers or so. I think we're not as strong as we'd like to be in terms of creativity, right? Like our, short videos, Instagram Reels, TikToks. This is all marketing related. But I would also say too, like, I would like to, I would say I'm a noob at raising, lots of money, right? Let's say it's like over $100 million or something like that. Like that would be new. I would also be new to having a board of advisors, because I own the majority of stake, in some cases 100% of a lot of stuff that we do. So, I mean, those are just a couple of things that come to mind. I would be a noob at kite surfing, right? I would want to try it, but I know I get destroyed. So
I love it. And what compels you then to take a step? And I'm not asking necessarily because I want you to share your life story unless you care to, but for listeners who are thinking, you know what, like there's something I know I need to do. There's a book called The Obstacle is the Way. Yeah. It's something I know I need to do. I'm kind of scared to do it, but I know that's the thing. It's literally in my mind right now. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to suck at kite surfing. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to do that. What's your impetus for taking that step?
I think it's running towards the pain. So like an example of this would be with Single Grain, the ad agency. So, I was leading marketing at a tech startup, and I was one of the co-founders asked me to come into the company, and I was not interested initially because I wasn't interested in a services type of business. And I was like, I come from tech. And then I reframed it. I was like, look, this company's failing right now, and they're tasking me with coming, because I helped turn the tech startup around, and we had a great product, we had a great vision, great team. But this one was completely different. This one was the original service was no longer working, which means the people, we might have to change everything around there too. So this was a complete turnaround, right? I was like, wow, if I can fly this plane that's going down while changing the engine and turn it around, I think I can do anything. And so it was the ultimate challenge to me. So initially I wasn't interested. And then I was like, whoa, I think I can make something of this. And so it's the challenge of making myself better and taking that leap. And, by the way, 6 months into it, the 4 partners wanted out, and I was able to buy the company for the $2. But after I took it over, I actually made it go from bad to worse, and we dropped all the way down to 1 employee. So, the plane was very close to hitting the ground. My outside accounting firm called me and said, hey, it might be time to shut it down. And I actually had said yes to a job offer that was well paying, but, I was just like, I can't do it. So slowly we turned the ship around, but, you only get so many of those opportunities. I like to say the opportunity of a lifetime comes every single year, but there's only so few that you can kind of take it and shortcut your success. And I thought this was one of those. So I think it's really important for people to, if people are all going one way, if you can think about it in a different direction, people call it contrarian thinking. I think that's what it is. So that's an example of running towards a challenge.
I love that. And while you were talking, I actually expected you to be making the gaming references here, but maybe I'm just nostalgic. It reminded me of playing StarCraft. And so for those who don't know StarCraft is a real-time strategy game where it's aliens versus humans versus other aliens. And well, anyway, it's a party. But what's interesting about that game is no matter what you're doing, your opponent is always also doing something to come try to destroy you. That's how the game works. And within the span of, 20 to 40 minutes, you can have a World War game inside of the game. Like if your opponent has amassed a giant army, you're not going to get far running from it. Eventually, they're just going to take you over. Like, you're going to have to deal with it at some point, right? And who can deal with the other person's army the most intelligently generally comes out on top. But what you said, running toward the pain, and I think that's a really powerful mantra or background verbiage for somebody to have in their mind when they're dealing with, we talked about the noob phase, but when we're dealing with that scenario when the plane's about to hit the ground and you're like, well, I'll take this on. There's something to be said about knowing when to pull out, but I'm going to take this on because I believe that this is the right thing for me to do right now, even though it's hard.
It's a test of resilience. I mean, in life or even in business, it's how resilient are you? And it's, these people are just human beings at the end of the day, right? You want the ultimate test of resilience. I mean, Elon Musk, right? Didn't need to do what with SpaceX and Tesla, didn't need to plow all his proceeds from PayPal into that. And look at him now. And by the way, he played a lot of games, but I want to go back to StarCraft for a second, because before we started recording, look, StarCraft's a perfect example of what life is. It's resource management. It's resource allocation. If you expand too quickly, you're leaving yourself wide open to attack. If you gamble and you overcommit, you're leaving yourself open as well. And so it's constantly thinking about, okay, what life is, it's balance across the board. Because if you overcommit and you're not nimble, then, everything can fall apart. And this is why, the CEO of Shopify, he will hire pro StarCraft players because they understand resource management and resource allocation. He said this himself. And they actually have a pro StarCraft team as well now.
Oh, nice. Don't mess with Shopify's pro StarCraft team. You'll get crushed.
Yep.
Their click per minute ratio is through the roof. All right, enough nerd talk there. So I appreciate that concept. The 1% better daily, it's an ethos that you can lean on. It's one that's always true, which is a very difficult thing to find. It's one that you can always commit to. And as you said earlier, commit to getting your buffs so that your 1% better can actually occur today. But that brings me then to the final thing I wanted to talk to you about through the book, and that is budgeting your worry. So there is a very interesting concept that you bring out, which is like, look, in the age of information, when there's a lot of things coming at you, and you use games as a, trigger point or springboard for this concept. In the age of information, when so many things are coming at you, the world's really big and you're really small. And there's only so much of you that you can direct to different things. So part of your journey is understanding what's worth worrying about and budgeting that intelligently. Right. So like an example would be, we just went through an election cycle here in the US. And if you have big business items that you're really trying to move on, but in between business meetings, you're scrolling through Twitter and like watching these arguments happen and you're like, oh man, I got to do this. How much of your bandwidth has been eaten up because you're worrying about things that perhaps you don't have any control over and that aren't really part of your immediate growth or process, right? And I could say this from a health and fitness perspective too, since that's a little more my purview than political. I'll help my clients. It's like, look, you could take a food journal and you could do the exercise thing. And they come to me with questions like, what brand of fish oil should I take? And should I be taking this pre-workout and stuff? And it's like, hey, what we could really do is focus on getting a little bit of cardiovascular exercise every day. And we can focus on eating less sugar. Let's focus on those two things. Let's budget our worry on those two things. And what's powerful is if you actually do that, you get results, regardless of what brand of fish oil you're taking or whether or not you're taking the right pre-workout or whether or not you're lifting just the right amount of weight. And I don't want to, there are certain levels where those sorts of adaptations really matter, but budgeting your worry is a very powerful part of progress. So what inspired that chapter for you? And how does that play out in your day to day?
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to prioritization at the end of the day. It's, I think a lot of times it's, people just, I talked about the concept of player characters versus non-player characters. And I think a lot of people in life are just kind of walk around as non-player characters, meaning that, in a game like a Diablo, a player character is a character that you or I control. And we can walk around. We have a lot more optionality in terms of what we can do. The non-player characters are the computers. They kind of they're static. They stand around. They don't change, right? Things go on over time. They're just the same. And so, the ones that are constantly prioritizing, they're thinking about, okay, what are the 1 to 3 most important things I can do in a day? I'm going to focus on those things. I'm going to focus on, to your point, what can I control? And, not worry about what I can't, because if you start to be concerned about over all these things that are out of your control, you budget a big piece of your mind, right? Where you could actually be using that towards impacting the world. And so that's not good resource allocation right there. We just talked about StarCraft. And so, thinking about, okay, how do I filter the information that's coming in? Because the information that we're taking in does guide our actions. It guides how we think about things. So who should I be following on Twitter? Should I be following, really smart people that are trying to change the world? Or should I be following, all these news Twitter accounts? And by the way, again, the information that you're taking in is going to shape your worldview. And so, every single day, just prioritizing the night before, what are the top 1 to 3 things I need to do, filtering the information that you're taking in, and, buffing yourself in the morning, controlling what you can control, and not worrying about the rest. Because in the grand scheme of things, the kind of reframe here is understanding that, we've been around for billions and billions of years, right? The earth. And in the grand scheme of things, you are not even a speck. You're nothing, right? And so I don't want to make people feel bad, but like it is what it is, right? And so, we're here for a short time and, enjoy what we can and make an impact, but understanding that even the biggest legends in the world, that we know of, like the Steve Jobs, and even the late Tony Hsieh, are we still going to know who they are in 1,000 years, 2,000 years? Like even that 2,000 years is not much, right? So in this grand scheme of things, there's not much to worry about. Only worry about what you can control. And then, just think of it as a little program that you're optimizing, right? You don't want if you have like a water bottle over here, you don't want to fill up with worry. You want to, you only want to be concerned about the things that you can control, because if it overflows with worry, that your mind's not optimized, and then you just, become like a mindless drone.
Well said. This is actually one of the reasons that we took our Betterment community off of social media into our own private virtual space, because social media, say what you want with it, it's a powerful place for connection. It's a powerful place for, knowing what's up with the people in your circle kind of thing. It's also a great place to share pictures of your kids and adventures and whatnot, which is a party. But it's very distracting. And from a gamer's perspective, if I could, have everybody visualize that there's a life bar of willpower over your brain at the beginning of every day. Like you have this much willpower. This is the amount of control you have in your world. And every time you do something difficult, every time you do something stressful, it depletes as the day goes on. And that's not just a gamer's analogy. That's something we're finding psychologically speaking, is that willpower significantly decreases over the day. That's why people don't eat ice cream first thing in the morning. When you cave on your dietary recommendations, it's not like 9 a.m. like, oh man, I need this ice cream. I can't say no. It's 9 p.m. after a long day and getting your kids to bed, and like you're rough and you're hungry and your workout was tough and the show you're watching is stressful, and you're like, I'm eating ice cream, man. Like I've got no more willpower. Where's the ice cream? And that entire chapter of budgeting your worry, I hadn't made the connection in my mind to the NPC, the non-playable character, versus the hero. And the call in the entire chapter was like, look, this is the key to being the hero. This is the key to becoming a hero. Is if you can take your bandwidth, your willpower in a day, and focus it on the things that matter to you, as opposed to the things that you don't really have a hand in and can't, then you can actually affect your sphere of influence, as opposed to being driven by your sphere of influence. And in psychology, that's the difference between agency, which is I have a part to play in the things in my world, versus subjectivity, which is things happen to me, like things tell me what to do. Agency versus subjectivity. And so I thought it was a deep chapter, and I appreciated that. Is there any pro tips or pieces out of the book, or maybe behind the book, that you'd like to share for how people can better budget their worries, or things that you have found really helpful?
Yeah, I think it's just, I think the things I talked about, right? The 1 to 3 things, the most important things, and you just worry about knocking those out. To your point, the willpower, you start strong and during the day, and you deplete it right there. And then, you've already had a good day, and everything else, after is just kind of icing on the cake. But yeah, getting the tough things out of the way. Like, it's still tough for me to sit alone with my thoughts for even 10 to 30 minutes, just meditating, right? Sometimes if I go like on a 90-minute Peloton, I'm on a stationary bike for 90 minutes, right? Like that's kind of a pain in the butt.
Literal pain in the butt.
Things like that. But it's just
picturing the bruise on my sit bones here.
Yeah, no, that's why you have to like stand all the time, out of the saddle. But that's what I say.
And the one thing I did want to draw out, you're very practical in the book. There's a place where you actually share a lot of the applications that you recommend for parsing your time well. I get the sense that, and tell me if I'm wrong, I get the sense that none of this came natural to you. The natural part was the wanting to get better, which is in the gaming phase of your life, as you say. But you've found a way to use several applications to help you get better in the places you're weak. So one of the things you talked about was, I want to say it's Pomodoro. Is that right?
Yeah.
It's an application that helps you to block your time in 25-minute segments for deep work, which is a concept that's, now blossoming in the realm of psychology and business. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the applications that you use? You mentioned meditation app. You mentioned Peloton gives you badges. I'd love to hear about those.
Yeah. I mean, some things that really help me. So I'm trying to, go for the things that are not super expensive. I have a silk sleep mask. It's if you go to Amazon, type in slip, it's SLIP, it's $50, but it's great. I mean, I never thought I'd use a sleep mask. One big thing that helps me when I go to bed, this might seem counterintuitive, but we all use our mouth to breathe when we go to bed. And so I put tape over my mouth. You can buy sleep tape on Amazon or whatever, but it increases my REM sleep by about 30 minutes.
That's cool.
And I don't have to wake up to use the restroom anymore at night. And I don't need to drink a lot of water, right? So you wake up dehydrated and stuff. So those are kind of, real world things, but Pomodoro app you mentioned, that's something that helps me block out time. What I would say too is, we use project management tools. It actually doesn't matter what you use. We just use Asana as a team. And what I would say is super helpful for me is my note-taking app is called Roam Research. So it's ROAM, and it allows me to link all my thoughts together. So if I'm reading a book, and it's about philosophy, I can tag philosophy, and all the philosophy books I read will all be linked together. And then I can actually come up with, more well thought out, tweets or, LinkedIn posts, right? It's basically a second brain for me. There's actually a program called Second Brain. And, if I think about desktop apps, that would probably be one of the big ones. But other than that, I'm just staring at my desktop right now. Loom helps me a lot. To be able to explain things very quickly. This is more of like a business use, but trying to think this helps make me productive. There's a tool on Mac called Alfred, and it basically allows me to become like a Jedi because I can just, open apps very quickly, open documents, slide them over very, very quickly. So those are just a couple of things. I can just go on and on about tools all day.
I love it.
Yeah.
Alfred, as in like Batman's sidekick, chauffeur,
yes.
Butler. Yeah. Okay. That's awesome. I want Alfred just to feel like Batman, honestly.
Yep. You certainly do. It'll make you feel that way.
So we've had quite the conversation. We have talked about video games in their relationship to succeeding in life, 1% better every day, budgeting your work, getting over the noob phase. And there's a lot more in this book worth talking about, but this is really, what we have time for wrapping about. I wanted to point out one thing and give you the last word. I thought it was really powerful in your conversation about gaming and how it applies in life, or how these concepts can apply as buffers or levels up in life. And I was struck that somebody with a gaming background was pretty gung-ho about making sure people eat well and exercise. And obviously that's what I do. I'm like reading the book and I'm like, ha, gamer, who gets it? Because I'll never forget, my college roommate that I talked about a little bit. I'll never forget walking into the room one time. It was after daylight savings time, and he didn't flip it. He didn't flip the clock so that, he'd look at the clock and get worried, but he had an extra hour. So that meant he could get ready for class and stuff. And there were like pizza boxes around and empty Mountain Dew bottles and stuff. And I remember walking in there and being like, ugh.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? And
yep.
And about 3 weeks of that sort of thing. This was shortly after a new expansion for World of Warcraft came up. About 3 weeks after that, he kind of emerged from the cave like a Mountain Dew addicted pizza cyclops, and he's like, I gotta go to the gym. I gotta get it. I'm only drinking water, no more soda. I gotta eat real food, no more pizza, And there was a certain point, I guess, where he just realized that mattered, and he would feel better, and he would, even in his game, he would function better if his mind and body were fed well and moving. When did that happen for you? Because I got the sense in your early gaming days that wasn't always a priority, and I'd love to know where the switch flipped. That was like, hey, dude, work out and eat well. It's good for you.
Yeah, I don't think I really started working out probably until I was 19 or 20 years old. So I started playing World of Warcraft when I was 18, I think. And then this is kind of around the same time too. So I was like, yeah, too much WoW. I think I got to work out. So, but I would just say, I think it's important to understand, and you know better than anybody here. It's just your body is a machine and it needs to be optimized. You have to keep feeding it the right fuels. Otherwise, if you feel the bad fuel, then, you're going to perform poorly for your family, your friends, or, in whatever you're doing. So.
Yeah, I envisioned someday, like a little, I don't know, some kind of smart sensor you could apply to a phone and then have an avatar in an application that would allow you to be like bells and whistles when you reached a new level. Because, you know, in your life, let's say you eat a good breakfast and you get enough sleep and you, I don't know, go for a run and your muscles grow like a quarter of an inch. Nobody's like, level 13, nice job.
Yeah.
Like, wow, like this is great. Keep up the good work, you know, but that's really what it's like. There's just no fanfare, right? There's no background.
I think we'll get there eventually. You know, it's, you know, with the way technology is going. So I think we're going to be able to see badges and things like that. So it'll be cool.
It'll be very cool. It'll be a lot of fun to figure out what's worth like celebrating. Like what's the 1% better, you know? Should you get more levels for quitting sugar or more levels for curbing your caffeine intake? But anyway, that said, I appreciated that from you. So from a fitness guy to a investor, author, past gamer guy, thank you for that. Keep that up. Like, keep inspiring the world to
appreciate that.
You know, take care of their bodies while they learn to be better gamers and stuff. That's awesome. I do want to say for my listeners here, if you are somebody involved in business and whatnot, but maybe have a past in gaming, you'll appreciate this. Like, you really will appreciate this. It's a lot of fun. I reminisced a lot through the book. So thank you very much for that. I was like, wow, like this is kind of a cool walk down all the goodness of memory lane.
Thanks for reading it. Yeah.
But at the same time, though, I do want to say, if you have kids who game regularly, maybe they're super into, oh, dang, what are the kids playing today?
Fortnite, League of Legends.
Fortnite, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Fortnite. There you go. Or at least that's popular around here. If your kid is really into this stuff, this is an interesting book. Now, I wouldn't say necessarily for your kiddo. Maybe at some point they'll appreciate it depending on how old they are. But for you to be able to speak the language of gaming in a way that's practical and applicable to what they're experiencing on a regular basis, I just found that to be pretty powerful, because it's very rare that you can speak the language of gaming unless you have played the game a lot. And your book was kind of I thought of it kind of like a starter, I don't know, you know, Spanish 101. It's like gaming 101, like all the things that a parent who's successful at their business and successful in their work and stuff, and they're looking at their kid going, I don't know, man, that might be too much time spent playing video games. How do you relate? How do you speak that language in a way that translates? I thought your book did a really good job of that. So I appreciated that. I thought it was really cool. I work with middle schoolers out in church and whatnot, so I felt a little more equipped to articulate some of the things I care to get across to them. So thank you for that. That was great.
Appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, you know, ultimately at the end of the day, it's probably geared towards the gamers that are, you know, 13 plus, or, you know, at least middle school plus. And also the parents. I think for anybody that, you know, isn't even a parent or like a gamer, I think it's also understanding that, like, this is kind of how life works. It's just a game and it's just puzzles to solve every single day. So, but yeah, it truly resonates with the gamers and the parents of the gamers. So
I would have enjoyed it in high school. I would have enjoyed it very much in high school. There are books that I read in college that connected with me like this, but they didn't connect on the gaming level. So I've got the link in the show notes below for those who want to pick this thing up. It's pretty cool. Throughout the thing, you actually do a really good job of integrating that with your online stuff. Like, they unlock certain power-ups for completing chapters and whatnot, and they get additional content and messages and stuff. So I thought that was a cool way to kind of unite the online and the book realm. And you also do a really cool job of bringing in so many different voices from the business, the marketing world, the Zig Ziglars of the world, for instance. Like, you do a great job of putting them in a place so that maybe somebody's not going to read all 27,000 books that were required to put all those things together. But this one's got some of the really goodness of the others. So it's a great book. I'd highly recommend it to my listeners. I enjoyed it very much. And my son's 5. So he goes, can I read that book, Dad? And I was like, well, you could, but it has 267 pages. And he goes, oh, I'm not ready for that yet. I'm like, yeah.
I love that.
Not quite. But I sincerely appreciate it. I like to give my guests the last word. If people don't hear anything else from you today, what would you like them to hear as they walk away from our conversation?
I think it's, you know, 2 words would be patient. That's one. The other thing is, you kind of mentioned this. The book is really it's a remix of a lot of things that I've enjoyed and picked up in life. And, you know, when you think about Apple, they stole the mouse from Xerox. They stole the GUI, the graphical user interface, from Xerox. And Steve Jobs himself has said everything in life is a remix. You look at what Elon Musk did with SpaceX. I mean, the rockets look fundamentally, it's the same base design as what we've seen in the 60s, right? But the big difference is they can come back to Earth. So we're all iterating. And I think there's a lot of pressure to have to be original or unique, when at the end of the day, you mentioned earlier, we're just standing on the shoulder of titans, and we're building on top of each other, and we're just constantly iterating. And that's part of leveling up too. You don't need to be completely original. So there's a lot of pressure to do that. I'm just saying, look, great things take a lot of time, and don't stress. Don't need to be, completely original. Just even 10 to 30% iteration of something is original. And I think we're going to drop a lot of other stuff on levelingup.com. So it was a whole game to get that domain as well. But that's what I would say.
Awesome. Eric, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your message. I think it really resonates with the ethos of what we do around here, and I really enjoyed your book. Thank you so much for coming on Defining Dad Bod.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
And to my listeners, this has been Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. Until next time, guys, kick butt, take names.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The free, practical advice and conversations here remain unbought and unbiased, thanks to the support of Better Daily. If this episode has been helpful to you, share it with someone in your life who you know it will benefit. Then, subscribe to the podcast and leave us a raving review to tell others what value Defining Dad Bod has brought to your health and fitness journey. Finally, if you're struggling for betterment, don't do it alone. We all have a cross to carry, and it's lighter when we do it together. Go to definingdadbod.com/betterdaily to get supported, challenged, and inspired to take yourself to the next level. Who knows who we could be if we could become 1% better every single day. Go to definingdadbod.com/betterdaily today. That's definingdadbod.com/betterdaily.